So in this video, we're going to be talking about motion blur. Slow shutter speed, long exposure photography, whatever it is you want to call it. We're going to be talking about what it is, how you do it, why I think it's a great little tool for photography, for having more fun, and generally how I've been experimenting with it over the past week and I guess throughout my photography life. So I was out shooting last week. I was out and about in Cologne. I was shooting for a little personal project that I'm doing. It's not really much. It's just taking some photos of some of the churches in Cologne, a little collection for my website. And I was on a bit of a walk. I was walking around town and I was trying to find different ways to shoot things. Towards the end, as I was walking, I was just walking by the cathedral and I took this photograph. It was getting a bit dark, the light was nice, and I really liked it. And it made me think a lot of motion blur, like the tool that it is in photography, how I use it, and how I've been using it for a while. So I thought, why not make a video about that? I was actually going to make a video about this little person project, but I think this is more interesting to talk about. What is motion blur? Or maybe a more technical word for it, long exposure photography. I guess in a simple way, it's basically just taking a photo while having the shutter speed in your camera slow enough that the subject is blurred, or anything that's moving in the frame looks blurred once you take the picture. And it's a tool that I've been incorporating into my photography for quite a while now. Not in the typical maybe landscape photographer long exposure way that we'll talk about in a bit, but in a way that when I'm just out and about shooting, it's a nice little tool in your arsenal to add a little something else to your photo. So I went out this week and I gave myself a little bit of a challenge as an experiment to only shoot slow, with the shutter speed in my camera set to a slow shutter speed, like max 1/50th. But the idea was that I wouldn't take any like normal photos. I wanted to kind of stick to having this limitation so I could experiment and find different ways of using this tool so I could talk about it today. So the trick with motion blur is really just playing with the shutter speed. Slower shutter speeds let the motion drag across the frame, faster ones freeze it. It's a balance. You can go handheld if you've got steady hands, but a tripod will definitely make life a little bit easier. That said, I don't have steady hands and I still go handheld, mostly because I just don't like carrying a tripod with me. But be careful, the slower your shutter speed, the steadier hands you'll need to keep the still parts of your photo looking decent. If not, they'll just be blurry and look pretty crappy. Honestly though, the best way to get it right is just to experiment. Try different speeds, move with your subject, or stay locked in one place and just let the world blur around you. There isn't really a single right way to do this. It's more about the effect that you're chasing. Motion blur works in more situations than you'd think. The obvious one is showing movement. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? Crowds of people, cars on a street, waves, waterfalls. There's so many ways to do this. Just think about anything that's moving around you, and I think motion blur is a great way to capture this. The classic long exposure landscape shot, for example, is built on motion blur. Landscape photographers love slowing down their shutter speed for those dreamy water shots. Light trails at night are another, or even just capturing the glow of ambient light in a city. That's motion blur being used as a tool. It's one of those things that once you start noticing it, you'll see opportunities for it all around. Typically, I use motion blur in my photography in two general ways. The first is, as I mentioned already, probably the primary way to use, or why you would use motion blur, is to just show motion in my photos. So basically anytime I want to show some kind of movement. It's when you're shooting and you're feeling like you're in the moment and you feel like, oh, there's a bit of motion here, I want to show that. That is when I slow my shutter speed down and I try and use a little bit of motion blur in my photography. I typically don't have a lot of people to shoot with. I don't have a lot of like massive photographer friends here in Cologne. So I don't have a lot of people that I can just like use as models or whatever. I find that when I'm out shooting, a little tool like motion blur is a great way to add a little bit of interest when you don't have other things to be shooting, or possibly like any very clear subject here or something. Adding a little bit of motion blur can be a nice little way to just like spice up your photos. But the other way, and probably most enjoyable reason I've been using motion blur lately, is for just a little bit of creative expression. As you can tell by like looking at these photos, when you slow your shutter speed down, it looks, I mean, it can look, it's not like a normal photo, right? Everything is blurred. It's not maybe the technical stuff that you want, unless you're doing some like landscape, long exposure stuff. Maybe that's the look you want, but what I'm talking about is sometimes it makes everything a bit crazy, it makes everything a bit weird. And that's kind of the look that I've been going for sometimes. And as I was experimenting in this, with these photos I took during the week, this was kind of what I was looking for. I wanted to give like a different view on things, or maybe like introduce a specific mood, or as the young people might say, a vibe. And motion blur is great for that. It can add like this kind of dreamy, hazy, like almost like a, I don't know, like a kind of a, it makes you feel like you're in something that's not real, you know? This is what I want to add to my photos. And it's really fun way for me to add a little bit of creative expression, because there's only so many times I can take photos of my locality or something, but using motion blur in this type of experiment was a great way to just mess around with it, see can I shoot this in a way where I can create something a little bit more out there, a little bit more different, a little bit more more based on a feeling rather than how it actually looks. It's imperfect, and you're adding a little bit of imperfection into your photo on purpose. And it's fun to see where you can go with that and where you can take it. Like something that I've been doing this week, but also lately, is I've been looking at things that I know well. So for example, the cathedral in Cologne. It's a very famous landmark. It's something that is very iconic. Everybody knows what it looks like. So there's only so many photos you can take of this, you know. It's been shot a million times. So the question photographers always ask when they look at stuff like this is, how can I take this different? Well, then maybe something like a tool like motion blur can be fun here. Because when you're taking something you're adding that bit of imperfection, and you're taking a photo of something that everybody knows, they already know what it looks like, right? So you can add the imperfection and they'll still probably know what it looks like. You can introduce the mood or the feeling as a layer on top of what the actual thing is. And that's what these photos, especially this one that I took last week that sparked this whole thought and for this video and this whole conversation, that's kind of what I was thinking when I was doing it. Everybody knows what the cathedral looks like, but how many people know what it feels like when you're, I don't know, crossing the bridge on a tram or something, or when you're walking through town and you catch a glimpse of the cathedral really quickly peering over the skyline. And adding in something like motion blur is a great way to achieve this type of objective in your photography, I guess. Sounds very formal language, but that's kind of what I mean. And it doesn't have to be landmarks. It can be anything. It can be your everyday stuff. It can be your street. Can be people, like a crowd of people. Everybody knows what that looks like. But if you add in some motion blur, some movement, it can make things feel a little different. So that's motion blur photography and all of the ways I use it and have been using it, as you see in this little experiment and the photos that I took. For me, basically, it comes down to a combination of two things. Two things that I think are maybe the most important things in a hobby like photography. It's a way to find a little bit of expression, and it's a way of having fun. And when you combine the two, I think you just end up with better photos and better work in general. Thanks as always for watching. Please let me know what you think. If you have any experience with motion blur or a little bit of long exposure photography yourself, would love to hear your feedback, maybe your tips, whatever. And of course your feedback on the photos, I always love hearing that as well. So thanks again, and I'll be back with another video very soon.